Welcome to another episode of Truth Bombs and Heart Nudges. This week we are diving into chapter 3 of God's Gift of Second Chances. If you are just tuning in and you missed the first two chapters, feel free to go back and watch the first two chapters. So this week, though, we are on chapter 3. So let's go ahead and dive right into that. Chapter 3. What does it mean to be broken? Where do you start? For me, it was admitting that I was broken. So in 2014, I believed that we are broken, or we can become broken. I have since changed my thinking on this. Now my thinking is that we are never broken. We just become disconnected from the vine. We become disconnected sometimes from ourselves because we need to be in alignment with our mind, body, soul, and spirit. And sometimes if we're not listening to ourselves or understanding ourselves or stepping out as the grace of God, we become disconnected. I don't believe that we were ever broken. It may feel like it, but it's just because you're disconnected from the source of all love. So in the moment I realized, going back to our book now, the moment I realized that I was disconnected, I didn't understand the entire scope of what it meant. I wanted to blame God for everything. His hand had to be against me for me to be this disconnected from everything, for my life to have spun so out of control that it left me standing with nothing. I remember the moment like it just happened, the moment when I realized my life had amounted to nothing, and everything leading to that moment was in fact a misinterpretation of what my life was supposed to be. I had dreams, wishes, things I wanted my life to be, and out of all of them, not even one was right. Something had taken me off my path, off course. Something had made my life miserable and lonely. Something had taken all of the good and replaced it with despair. No matter what I tried to do, none of it worked. All of my dreams were gone, and to even try to remember one of them was lost to me. I was living in a black hole, a place of darkness. Darkness is not a good place to live. Just saying this seems like such a silly thing, and yet many live their lives that way. I found myself living in darkness. I had been living there for such a long time. Somewhere down the road of my life, things had taken a turn for the worse and then stayed there. Everything I had ever wanted was so far gone, so far out of my reach. There was no going back. Darkness was where my life was and where it would stay. So here I was in darkness, alone, scared and positive that everything was ruined for me. I couldn't go back and change anything. My life was now worthless. That is really how I felt. To say I was angry would be an understatement. I was tired. I felt abused and neglected. Where was this God who was supposed to be all-powerful? Why did he allow my life to end up like this? What did I ever do to deserve this darkness? Why did he hate me so much? Psalm 10:4. In his pride, the wicked man does not seek him. In all his thoughts, there is no room for God. It's hard to admit that my mind was only filled with my own selfish needs. My shame and pride pushed God completely out and left me to the full attack of Satan and total darkness. Why is it so easy to blame God for everything that is wrong? His hand is light. His blessings sit there waiting for your return, and yet we blame him. He placed us in the darkness, and we did nothing to end up there. So many questions bounced inside of my head, and not one of them made sense or made me feel any better. I remember the moment I just didn't care anymore about anything, least of all myself. If God didn't care about me, then why should I? It was storming outside, not a light rain, but an onslaught of water, with the sky filled with lightning and sounds of booming thunder. It was perfect in comparison to how I was feeling. The onslaught of the water was my tears and the questions in my head, the pain in my life and the pounding of my heart, the thunder, and the lightning was my anger at the injustice of my life, how God had abandoned me when I needed him the most. I ran out into my backyard, into the rain, into the lightning and thunder, filled with anger at everything my life had turned out to be. I couldn't go back. I couldn't change what had already happened. I couldn't fix what my life had become. I couldn't get out of the darkness. I couldn't fix my brokenness. My life was what I lived in. Darkness, and never again would there be anything different. It was too late to change anything now. Too much time had passed. Too much of my life was gone. Too much. Just too much. I turned my face toward the sky as rain mingled with my tears and my clothes quickly became sopping wet, and with all of the pain and the anger inside of me, I cried out to God. Why? Do you hate me so much? I can honestly say I most definitely did not expect an answer, but an answer was what I got. As clearly as I questioned him and blamed him and yelled at him, he questioned me. Why do you hate yourself so much? Why, indeed? As soon as he asked, everything inside of me shifted, and I wondered why did I hate myself so much? I didn't even realize it until that very moment that it was truth. I did hate myself. I hated what my life was. I hated the choices I had made that brought me to this point, and I hated how easily my life had gotten out of control. The biggest question now was, what do I do about it? How do I erase all of the pain, all of the mistakes, and all of the shame? Now, we all have defining moments in our lives, and this was one of mine. What brought me to this moment was many different things. 6 months before it, my father passed away suddenly, and my husband walked out. Having a marriage fail left me feeling like myself was the failure, and losing my dad was just me feeling lost. I was working on my bachelor's degree when this happened, and I chose to shove all I was feeling deep inside so I could finish the semester. I remember promising my mom I would finish, and in order to support my daughter, I really had to. So that was an easy choice to make. It was Saturday, June 20th of 2009, when I yelled out to God. I remember it. It was only 4 short days later when God spoke to me again. And the dates are not even important, but I remember them perfectly. This time I was staying at my mom's house. It was time for me to come to terms with my father dying. I was not prepared for him to die. I thought I had more time. Our relationship was work in progress. I grew up believing I meant nothing to him. These feelings grew out of things he did and things I thought he should be. To blame him would be as useless as blaming myself. Some things just are. As humans, we all make mistakes. In order to forgive the mess of my life, I also needed to forgive him for the mess of his. I could no longer hold on to things that just caused more pain, so I forgave him for everything he ever did to hurt me, and slowly I learned to forgive myself. On that day, I found myself lying in his room and staring at his things that were still where he left them. This was my 4th day staying with my mom, and I'm not sure why that's important, but I remember it. The number of days aren't important, but for those 4 days, I couldn't find my appetite. Every time I tried to eat, just one bite made me feel sick. So here I was, food deprived, tired, broken, in the darkness that had become my world, trying to find meaning in life and in death. I couldn't understand any of it. I'm not sure how long I laid there, staring at the ceiling, but with perfect clarity, I saw my dad in the moment of his death. He had gone out with his friend to cut down trees for someone. This was something he did to help people he knew. I never knew he did this until after he passed. He would go out and cut up trees and use it as firewood. He would leave it and drop it off for people, whoever needed it. And this particular day, the tree fell to the ground, but a piece of it broke off and it bounced back up and it hit him and he died. Just like that. In just the blink of an eye, his life was taken. This was the part that I knew, but God showed me what I didn't. I could see perfectly my father's body falling toward the ground. Before his body landed, though, God reached down from the sky through the clouds, catching him in his mighty hand. My father's spirit was lifted into heaven as his body fell through God's hand to the ground. It was as if it was happening right in front of me, like I had been standing there at that precise moment when it all happened. Sitting here now typing this, I realized quite possibly I was. God had shown me how he is all of the time. He isn't just Alpha and Omega, but both at the same time. He stands in all time. He is in all moments. And he knew how hard I struggled with trying to understand why God had taken him already from me when we were just starting to learn to like each other, because for so long, all I felt from him was hate. And he was gone. God's voice spoke. He is sorry for how he treated you. He loves you. To hear my father say he loved me was all I ever wanted to hear. I never heard those all-important words while my father walked this earth, and to hear them now made tears stream down my face. But God wasn't finished talking yet. I took a deep breath in and continued to listen. He asked me to leave my life behind, to stop looking for someone to be the one. He had things for me to do. It was just such a time as this for me to let go, to give him the pen to my life and allow him to write my story. He would bring the perfect someone at the right time, but right now there were things I needed to do and things my godly created someone needed to do first. Without hesitation or a single thought, I said yes, and I gave God the pen to my life. I can look back now at that moment, honestly say I didn't know the full extent of what I was saying yes to, but I felt God's peace and I knew with perfect clarity God was where I wanted to be. I knew my life spiraled out of control because I chose to walk without God. I chose it. I knew without him I would just keep making all the same mistakes, and I didn't want to live my life that way anymore. I knew that if I wanted things to be better and had happiness, I had to put my life in God's hands. This is when my new life began. My old life was a huge pile of brokenness and shame, but I found out God loved me anyway. I finished visiting my family and I came back home to finish my degree. I shared what had happened to me with my friends and told them how I was giving my life to God and I would not date anymore, but go where he told me to. All but one of my friends looked at me funny, tried to convince me that God wasn't in the little details like finding me a husband, and then walked out of my life as if I had the plague. It hurt to be treated that way, but I knew in my heart God was my home. This wasn't the greatest start to a new life, but I stood my ground. I knew what my life had been like without him. There was no way I was going to go back to that. For the next 2 years, God and I spent a lot of time together. He would take something from my past, and together we would work on looking at it and letting it go. Piece by piece, he slowly took out things that caused me pain, lies, basically anything that would keep me from growing in him. Even now, as I write this, he's showing me clarity. It is amazing to me that God can even use definitions to prove his point and to show clarity into what my life once was to move me into something much, much better. I was disconnected. At this point, I would say it was broken. So what does it mean? So the definition from dictionary.com states reduced to fragments, fragmented, ruptured, torn, fractured, not functioning properly, out of working order, fragmentary or incomplete, interrupted, disrupted, or disconnected, weakened in strength, spirit, tamed, trained, or reduced to submission, which led me to break, also from dictionary.com. To smash, split, or divide into parts violently, reduced to pieces or fragments. To overcome or wear down the spirit, strength, or resistance of, to cause to yield, especially under the pressure, torture, or the like. To impair or weaken the power, effect, or intensity of. So, let's look over each of the definitions I felt God wanted to discuss. Just want to note there are many more definitions for break, but felt these were the most important ones for what is being discussed. Okay, so reduced to fragments or fragmented. Every time you choose to go on your own without consulting God, your relationship with him becomes fragmented. It becomes harder to hear his words. You become desensitized to his voice. For me, I had heard God speak to me before, but what really fragmented my relationship with him was when I chose to marry someone who did not intend for me to marry. It was my action that fragmented my relationship with him, not something he did. You may be wondering what it is like to hear God's voice. When he speaks to you, it's like hearing your own voice. He is the voice in your head speaking to you when you are about to do something you know you shouldn't do. His voice is a whisper. What he has to say is more intelligent than our own voice, and mostly he speaks in what some may perceive as riddles. It makes sense without making sense. It can make sense the first time you hear it, and then later, even more sense when what he said has happened. Sometimes God will use others around you to speak to you. Other times it's just a feeling guiding you in a specific direction. It's like a knowing. You must be willing to hear him. He longs to communicate with each of his children. He longs for a relationship with each and every one. He wants to give every child their heart's desires, but it's up to you to listen and follow, even if it doesn't make sense to you. Once you've gone far from the path that was intended for you, it takes time to make your way back. God is the only one who can get you back to where you're supposed to be. Ruptured, torn, fractured. When you walk outside of God's path for your life, the relationship with him becomes fractured. The line of communication with him becomes torn. When it's like this, you cannot hear him or know the right way to go. With each step you take away from him, your communication with him gets out of working order. You can no longer hear him because you have ruptured the ability to do so. Once the line is ruptured, you cannot just get it back. The tear must be fixed. The fracture needs to be healed. Not functioning properly or out of working order. Satan wants nothing more than to see your relationship with God not functioning properly. He works nonstop day and night to attack you, to keep you from God. Is all he has. Being cast out of heaven, sent away from God's light, means all he has is darkness. Keeping you in the dark is his way of getting back at God. God doesn't want to see any of his children in darkness. One day I asked God, why does it sometimes feel like life is meaningless and empty, like nothing matters? And this is what he said to me. This is what Satan wants you to feel, so you stop trying, so he can lead you into darkness and corrupt your soul. Without joy, life is meaningless. Without love, life is empty. Without me, nothing matters. He wants to take you to that dark place and chain you down to the place where he knows he will spend eternity. He doesn't want to be there alone. He knows of my truth. He knew how it felt to live in my joy and my love, and he threw it all away. He can never return to it. He resides in the darkness he created. For eternity shall he stay. He wants to take from me. He wants as many souls as he can manage to turn into blackness, for it hurts me to lose my children. It is all he has left, to turn my children astray into an eternity of darkness, a place without me. A place without me. I have walked in places without God. I cannot imagine an eternity without him. How horrific and indescribable must that place be? To be cast down must have been a horrible experience. I do not wish to join Satan in that place of darkness, the place Satan tries to drag us all, the place he tries to convince us doesn't exist. It is only to Satan's benefit for it to not exist. If he can convince you it does not exist, then he can slowly drag you to it through confusion and denial. Once the time has come for the end, is this where you want to spend eternity? I've had people try to convince me there is no hell, but we cannot choose what sounds good out of the Bible, for it is all truth. The Bible clearly states it is real. Matthew 7:13. You can enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. The highway to hell is broad, and its gate is wide for the many who choose that way. Matthew 10:28. Don't be afraid of those who want to kill your body. They cannot touch your soul. Fear only God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Luke 12:5. But I'll tell you whom to fear. Fear God, who has the power to kill you and then throw you into hell. Yes, he's the one to fear. Fragmentary or incomplete. Until we allow God to fill us with his light, we will feel incomplete, like something is missing. We spend our time trying to fill it with worthless things and still wonder why we feel so alone. We seek to find wholeness within another person, but God is the only one who can make us feel whole. He is what we are missing. We will never be complete until we are just fully God's. Alone, we are just a fragment of who God created us to be. Interrupted, disrupted, or disconnected. My daughter said it was like you were talking with God on the phone and you hung up on him and all you have left is nothing. You can go back and pick up the phone, but he's not on the other end. If you do not have God, you don't have anything. Walking with your own desires disrupts the flow from which the Holy Spirit is delivered to you. When you become disconnected from God, nothing will make sense. That's why Jesus spoke in parables. He had to be connected to the vine to understand what he was talking about. Weakened in strength, spirit. Without his voice or him, you are left living on your own strength, and you're too weak without him. Left to your own devices, you can find yourself wandering in the darkness with Satan. Satan loves the darkness because while we cannot see, he can see perfectly and trip us up every time. Tamed, trained, or reduced to submission. If you are not submissive to God, then you are submissive to Satan. There's no gray area. If you do not choose God, you choose Satan. You only have two choices. One may think that by not choosing Satan, then they are safe. But the truth is, if you don't specifically choose God, then Satan is your choice by default. One must believe that Jesus came and was crucified for your sins. You can only get to God through Jesus. Jesus came to earth as a man to experience life as a human, to understand us, to make a way for us, and to be our spokesman. It was Jesus' blood that was drained completely to wash away our sin so you could get to your Father in heaven. There's no other way. God cannot be near Son. The only way to have our sins washed away is through Jesus. To smash, split, or divide into parts violently, reduce to pieces or fragments. I heard God's voice instantly when I read this definition. When you go off on your own and try to find the person to spend the rest of your life with, and you get it wrong, it breaks you. Every person you give your heart to that was not created to know your heart, you're basically taking a sledgehammer in your own hand and smashing your heart violently. You may be thinking that this is too dramatic, but it's truth. You were not created to be with multiple people. You were not created to go through that kind of pain. It is definitely not God's best. God wants only the best for his children, which is why, for those who are meant to be with another, God created them specifically for each other. Your heart was never meant to fit with anyone except the one it was created for. I know there are many out there who believe there are many different people you could be with that will work. God has shown me that to be a snare. Satan loves to catch people, and God made someone specifically for you that fits with you in all ways because God designed it to be so. Just as Eve was created for Adam, there is someone created for you. God only wants his best in your life. Once you are broken into pieces, it's harder to see what piece matches with another and easier for Satan to keep breaking you more and more. To overcome or wear down the spirit, strength, the resistance of, to cause to yield, especially under pressure, torture, or the like. Satan uses this to break you down. He attacks you all the time. When he knows you are already hurting, he swoops in and applies more pressure, so you feel like you break. If you blame God for what is wrong, Satan can use this to his advantage. He can do all the work, and by choosing to blame God, Satan wins. Every time Satan can keep you from God's truth, he wins. You yield to Satan out of confusion. He wears you down by torturing you day and night. Isaiah 40:30. Even youth grow tired and weary, and young men will stumble and fall. Jeremiah 9:5. Friends deceive friends, and no one speaks the truth. They have taught their tongues to lie. They weary themselves with sinning. You must be careful, for sin can cause more sin because it gets easier and easier to do. To impair or weaken the power, effect, or intensity of. Giving in to Satan makes it easier and easier for him to do his job, to deceive and destroy. That's all he knows. It's all he desires. John 10:10, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. Going back to where I felt my life was a misinterpretation of what it was supposed to be, I couldn't help looking at what it meant as well. What did it mean to misinterpret something? I went back to dictionary.com and typed in misinterpretation and brought up misinterpret, which means to interpret, explain, or understand incorrectly. That means when you do as the world does, you are understanding incorrectly because Satan is of the world and God is not. God is not of this world. He is above it and wants to guide you on your path to lead you to blessings that are not of this world. That's the end of chapter 3. Meet me next week for chapter 4.